Okay, welcome back to the channel. If you're watching live, hello and welcome. And if you're watching the recording later, also welcome and thank you for clicking on the video. Just check that all of my screens are working. I'm going to be going through a case study analysis as part of this series of videos I'm putting together on managing difficult conversations. And today we're looking at conflict between a couple of friends. So it's a challenging topic for me to talk about. As you'll see in the case study today, there's a bit of a contentious scenario that we're going to be discussing, and it's accusations of racism. Why does this person have this racist book on their shelf? One of the friends seems to think that that shouldn't happen, and the other person seems to think that there's some justification for it. And I think that this topic of racism, or are you for this or are you against this particular issue, is something that's particularly challenging for a lot of friend groups at the moment. There's so many contentious topics like the Gaza issue or Ukraine or the trans issue or topics like immigration. They're very emotionally charged. And so it's not uncommon, I think, for fallout to occur between people within a friends group. And one of the challenges that we need to navigate as individuals is, what do we engage with? When is it worth holding the line, drawing the boundaries, putting our perspective forward? And when is it worth focusing on the relationship repair or something else that might be important in the moment? So I'll be talking through a quote, also looking at a Robert Greene quote like I did last time. I'll talk through the case study scenario, and then we'll go through some of the different practical tools that I often include when I'm delivering conflict resolution training. So this is one of my favorite books, is The Daily Laws, written by Robert Greene. And this is a quote that actually has come from there. So it's from Balthazar Gracian. Regard it as more courageous not to become involved in an engagement than to win in battle. And where there is already one interfering fool, take care that there shall not be two. Sometimes I think people react and they get sucked into the drama, they get sucked into the tension that might be going on between friends, especially when it's a topic that's important to you personally. But I really like this idea of it being more courageous, almost avoiding that temptation to get sucked in and get involved in the conflict. And I might just read a little bit of what Robert Greene talks about on this topic. So initially he raises this kind of idea in the book, The 48 Laws of Power, but this particular book I'm looking at is The Daily Laws. He says, do not let people drag you into their petty fights and squabbles. At the same time, you cannot completely stand aside, for that would cause needless offence. To play the game properly, you must seem interested in other people's problems, even sometimes appear to take their side. But while you make outward gestures of support, you must maintain your inner energy and sanity by keeping your emotions disengaged. No matter how hard people try to pull you in, never let your interest in their affairs and petty squabbles go beneath the surface. Give them gifts, listen with a sympathetic look, even occasionally play the charmer, but inwardly keep both the friendly kings and the perfidious tyrants at arm's length. By refusing to commit and thus maintaining your autonomy, you retain the initiative. Your moves stay matters of your own choosing, not defensive reactions to the push and pull of those around you. Have you ever felt like that? There's conflict going on between your friends group and you react to the push and pull of those around you. You'll see in a moment why I've thought that that quote would be particularly relevant today. So let's have a look at the case study that we're going to be focusing on. So the author writes, I'm 30 with two best friends, Sally and Gemma. Since we were friends since we were 5. Everyone has now grown up. Sally has 2 kids and Gemma is also married and busy, so we don't connect frequently. Recently, we had the chance to meet for coffee at Gemma's house. As we were leaving, Sally noticed a book on the shelf called 10 Little N-Words, written as the actual word. She immediately zeroed in on Gemma, demanding to know why she has this book. Gemma explained that she's a literary aficionado and interested in the first edition of a rare book. Sally's face immediately darkened and a brief argument followed, with both people accusing the other of being racist. It has been 2 weeks and the only thing that has changed is that they have unfriended each other on social media and made repeated posts about the importance of fighting anti-racism. It's interesting, isn't it, when those accusations are thrown around, pretty often they are thrown in both directions. it's racist to have the book. Well, we can certainly understand why that might be someone's perspective if they feel like it's offensive language or something similar. And on the other hand, the person with the book might say, well, it's racist to demand that I remove it. That wasn't the author's intention back there when they choose that language. So you're reading in retrospectively some type of motive or intention that wasn't there. So they might say that they're looking at it from a purely historical perspective or something similar. And the challenge is when we're navigating these kind of situations is that it's not a purely logical, rational discussion that we have. A lot of the time, these topics are incredibly emotionally charged, and that's because of the things that have happened to us. It's often because of the experiences that we've been through, what we've been taught, what we've learnt, what we've realized over time, what we've experienced ourselves in a lot of situations. So this overly simplistic scenario of why do you have this book? Well, that's only going to be the tiny top of the iceberg in amongst all of the different beliefs and perspectives and opinions and motives that the people both have. So I think initially we need to be very careful at painting too much of a black and white perspective on these kind of topics. If I can go back to the scenario for a moment. For example, it's possible that Sally's from a particular cultural background and she's experienced discrimination and racism firsthand. So for her, she might look to friends to have kind of a supportive role, like, are you with us or against us? Are you a bystander or an upstander, so to speak, this kind of language. On the other hand, you can very easily imagine, was it Gemma who's got the book and explains that she's really interested in literature and it's quite a valuable book from the sounds of it. Like you can understand why, from her perspective, being accused of being a racist is so incredibly offensive, especially when it comes from a friend who she might think really knows her well and should know that she's not a racist, for example. But it's not this black and white, like rational conversation that we're having. A lot of these topics are ambiguous and we've got very different perspectives and often at multiple layers. So it's important to consider what's your goal here. If you're the person and there's two friends who are in conflict, well, first of all, I might think about my goals for me. If I'm going back to the office at work, I might need to limit the amount of stress that I'm dealing with. So this afternoon might be not be the right time to talk about this. I might have a goal that I do really passionately care about this topic, and I would like the other people to know my perspective. I don't want to be tarnished with the same brush that they've been painted or something similar. And those goals for ourselves might change and develop over time. It's not so much that we're deciding this is important and this it's not, but we do need to decide which of these goals will we prioritize. You might also consider goals for the relationship. Like, whatever happens, I don't want this to create a rift that means that we never speak with one another. Even if we have different views about this topic, like what's going on in this overseas war or what's going on in this particular issue, I still would like to maintain our friendship. It still really matters to me that we have a sense of connection. And then what are your goals for others? You might see that Sally or Gemma is they're very distressed by this situation. So you might think in the short term that there's something that you should do to support them. Maybe you've got a goal to change their mind or increase their perspective over time as well, hopefully lead them to a higher level of awareness. Or maybe for you, it's the other bystanders, like you're aware that Gemma's children are watching all of this and you don't want them to be exposed to adult topics that they might not properly understand. Like, all of these are nuanced perspectives, and it's not so much that we can very clearly identify what our goals are in any situation. Of course we can't. We're acting in a way that's partly reaction and it's partly a response that's chosen and considered. But as much as that response is chosen and considered, it's important to think about, well, what are our goals here? What are we actually aiming for? We could also think about the different types of conflict and apply it to scenarios like this too. For example, if we think about data conflict, that might be the misunderstandings here. Like maybe Sally doesn't understand that this is a non-fiction book. So Gemma could deal with the topic in that way. It's not like I have this here because it's a fictional book. This is an account of history, and we need to remember history if we're going to avoid making the mistakes of the past. So there could be a data thing, like it's fiction or not fiction, or it's not my book, someone lent it to me, or I don't have the actual book, it's just the cover or the sleeve, or whatever the information is. There might be misunderstandings there. So Gemma could deal with the topic on that layer, and the third person, the accidental mediator here, could deal with it in terms of the data. We could also deal with it though in terms of the value. Like we don't want to repeat the same mistakes of history. So that's a value that the person's got as a justification for why they should have the book on their shelf. Whereas the other friend in the group might have a different value. They might think, you know, the experiences that I've got, you know, my background. They might experience it almost as a sense of betrayal that the other person would have this book and kind of be waving it in their face almost. We could think about just dealing with it at a structural layer. Maybe we don't meet at Gemma's house anymore. Let's just meet at the cafe up the road. That might prevent some of the triggers for the conflict coming up down the track. Or doing it by email instead of in person, or having a conversation in person and having a coffee instead of these narky emails going back and forth. Particularly in terms of the fact that both of these people are posting social media posts. I think arguably structural conflict could bear a lot of fruit if we decide to engage with it like that. We could deal with it in terms of the relationship. Like maybe the thing that is causing the conflict is that Gemma feels very offended about the way that Sally brought it up with her, or Gemma has made assumptions about what her beliefs might be, which actually aren't correct. So she feels offended, she feels slighted, and so she's backed up a little bit, gone into her silo a little bit, not reached out, not been as willing to engage, as positive as normal. And so then Sally might interpret that as Gemma having a problem, having a chip on her shoulder or something else, and so then she responds in kind. So we can see these sort of reciprocal patterns going on in the relationship. And so options for dealing with the relationship conflict layer might be things like an apology, giving them a chance to have a vent, giving a chance to express their perspective and correct the ledger, so to speak, if they feel like they've been misunderstood or misinterpreted. But that's not going to solve the problem if underneath it they've got different ideas about whether or not it's okay to have these books on your shelf or not, if they are considered to be contentious. And then finally, we could deal with it at an interest conflict layer. Sally might say something like, look, I appreciate we've got really different perspectives here. If I'm going to come and we're going to meet in your house though, would you mind not leaving it in a place where I have to see it? I know this isn't your intention, but for me, I find those things quite distressing, and then it's difficult to concentrate when I get back to the office at work. So ask specifically for what she wants. Could you please remove the book? That's different to saying you shouldn't have that kind of book here. Like we're asking with a specific request, which means that Gemma might be able to meet it without us necessarily agreeing on the reason why or the level of importance or the level of consideration that we're giving to the topic or whatever else it might be. I think this types of conflict tool is particularly helpful when we're feeling stuck, because it often helps us to unpack or explore additional layers of options. Like maybe we have just been going back and forth about the facts. You think that it's my book, but I just borrowed it from the library. I was writing an essay on it for my history exam at university or something similar. Like maybe we could deal with the facts or the interests. Could you just do this? Could we not talk about this anymore? Could we change this? Could we tweak this? Or values. It sounds like this is your value. I've got a different perspective here. And there might be some middle ground that you can reach. Like you both agree that racism is bad. It's just you've got different perspectives about whether or not having this kind of book on your shelf would contribute negatively or positively. Like we've got the underlying value that's the same about racism, but maybe we could talk about how we're going to manage that in our relationship. We could tweak the structure and change that, or think about options for the relationship, like the apologies or that reciprocal pattern and how we can interrupt that, like I've talked about on previous episodes of my conflict skills podcast. Look, I hope that that's been helpful for you, looking at that case study of the fallout between friends, whether you're dealing with a fallout situation yourself, or you might be able to talk about the approaches that I've described and then translate it to other situations that you face. If you'd like additional options for resources and tools for dealing with conflict, you can check out my podcast, Conflict Skills, or sign up to my newsletter on my website, simongood.com. Thank you very much for watching. Hope to see you again soon.